So with that, I want to give you a quick introduction. We're going to have Carolyn Kuharski, and who is from DISA, and Dave Vinogran from GDIT, who are going to share their thoughts with us this afternoon. Just a few remarks about each one of them. Ms. Kuharski, did I brutalize that?
Kuharski, but
Kuharski, yeah,
that's
Kuharski.
close.
Serves as the Deputy to the Chief Data Officer in leading and influencing the use of data to derive business operations and operations outcomes in support of the warfighter. She'll be our first speaker, and she'll be followed by Dave Vinogran. He is GD's Vice President for AI and Data Insights. Dave leads a team that sets GDIT's strategy for data and analytics solutions that solve customer challenges in data warehousing, big data, data science, and advanced data analytics. And we've heard a lot about that this week. So without further ado, I want to introduce Ms. Kuharski.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think we have a slide that I can possibly bring up. There we go. Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. As stated, Caroline Kuharski, part of the Deputy Chief Data Officer for DISA. While the CDO office is about 7 months old here at DISA, which is why we don't have a lot of information on it. So this is kind of like our, hi, this is who we are, coming out party, which is fantastic. I don't really want to go over the slides too much, but I just really wanted to give some information of what our role is in the agency and what the intent is, where we're trying to go with data for DISA. And while our focus is DISA, it's not just DISA. We have to work collaboratively across the enterprise to ensure what we're doing with data is complementing what the enterprise is doing with data and how we're able to share it, make it safe. And then we have the core principles of the office, but it's also kind of principles of what we should be doing as a whole with data governance, operations, business as a whole. So that's enough of that slide. We don't have to keep doing that. So let me pass this to you before I forget. Okay, thanks, Dave. Leveraging data as an asset. What does that mean, right? We can talk about, oh, data this, data that. You can make it a game if you really want to. But really, it's thinking about it in a different way. It's not just ones and zeros. This is a tangible entity that we can derive value from once we start putting things together. If you really think about our asset management, our laptops, our anything physical that we manage within the agency, we have tons of solutions to make sure we know where all of those things are and how they're tagged, and we have all this information on them. Well, why aren't we really doing that with our data holistically across the board? We do have some cyber analytics that are doing wonderful things within the agency, but we need to be able to combine that, not just cyber, not just business, but all of it. And that's really what my office is going to really start pushing for, that data sharing and that data access across the board. We need to take the data that we derive from our rate structure, from our costs of implementation, our costs of operations, so that we can make sure that the investments that we are making really derive true value, and that the investments that we're making are correct and providing that best service for the warfighter, right? So, challenges. What are the challenges that we see? I could probably talk about this for 4 hours, but since I only have about 10 minutes, we're going to kind of keep it short, right? So, challenges. Data silos. The mindset of programs and services is data's an afterthought, unfortunately, when data should be at the center of our engineering, of our architecture. What are we doing with this data? What data are we going to get? And who needs to know it? And how are we going to share it with them? But kind of like what we spoke about earlier, Dave, is how do we also keep it secure, though? So you want to be able to give data to all the people, but then again, we got to make sure that it's the right people doing the right mission that are getting that, right? So ops. Think about being a watch officer on the floor and being able to see your end-to-end infrastructure in real time without having to stand up a war room, without having to call 18 people to get 18 different pieces of data so you can get that full information spectrum. That's that sharing piece that we need to get to. But also making sure that, that our business people, or the business groups, within the agency, are able to see, all right, so we just invested here. Are we really getting what we want to, utilizing that performance information? So data silos, bringing these things together, all these various storage elements where we're housing the data, just being able to look at it holistically. Data accuracy. Garbage in, garbage out. We hear it all the time, right? But it's just to the point where, oh, somebody will fix it. We'll get to that. We need to be able to ensure that we're tagging the data, that we're placing the data in places where it needs to be at the beginning. Cleaning up later is not an option. That is where we kind of stranglehold ourselves to continue to have the inability to be strategic, basically, right? If we're always in cleanup mode, if we're always trying to think of, oh, we're having all this data, but we'll just fix it later, we lost the battle from the beginning. The services that we're providing to our mission partners are very, very important. We have a stellar reputation. We should be doing this from the beginning correctly, right? So data accuracy is a big one. And then data-centric minded workforce. Change is hard. As humans, we're not big advocates for change, right? We like things the way they are, and if it's not broke, we don't have to fix it. That's not the right approach in how we're really handling our data hygiene, right? We really need to give our people the resources and the training and change the mindset of, I understand you think knowledge is power, but it's also inhibiting us from really being able to be strategic in the long run and not just think about the fires of today, but think about where do I need to be in 3 years? DISA is fantastic about supporting, the warfighter, and we have all these great things, but we got to continue to evolve, and we got to continue to think. So it's not just us doing that with, some of our mobility services or all these fun things. We got to do it internally with data and how we're giving it to Army and Navy and things like that. We don't have data owners anymore within the enterprise, within DoD. The DoD CDO office has said so. We're now data stewards or data custodians or whatever we want to call ourselves, because all DoD data is for everyone, and we need to be able to capitalize on that. So I think that's, those are our challenges. Where do we see success, right? I think we can find success when we start really leveraging our data as a whole, right? I know we could say it all day long, but whenever I don't have to call 4 people to get information for one report, I think that's when I'm pretty successful, right? When we're able to give this data to individuals at their fingertips, I think that's fantastic. I think whenever we have an Army individual who's seen a little bit of jitter on their end devices, that they're able to just go and see what's going on with the IEPs themselves without having to call DISA and open a ticket and maybe a war room. That would be fantastic. I know that my ops community would probably really appreciate the decrease in tickets for data requests. That is what I find would be an element of success. But then also ensuring that we are implementing a governance and policy framework for the agency so that they know the parameters that they should be working in whenever it comes to data. I can talk all day about, oh, we should do this, we should do that, but if we don't give them the structure, the rules, we'll once again go back into this siloed, my information, I'm doing it my way approach that has gotten us in this, this inability to share situation. I don't know if any of you guys saw the keynote from General Skinner that he did yesterday. But he said something that really, really resonated with me, and I want to just kind of reintroduce that in this discussion. And what he said was, if you own the data, you own the high ground. That was pretty, I don't know about you guys, but that really, really hit, because it was like, okay, you know what? You're right. If us owning this data, us ensuring that the data is going where it's supposed to go, that's going to give us leverage. That's what's going to make us succeed in the long run and be our best selves for the mission partners and the services that we provide. So I think I'm going to have to steal that from him and use it quite a bit, because I really like that one. But that's kind of where we're at within DISA as far as where we're trying to go with data, what our outlook is, and some of our challenges. And I definitely want to make sure that industry vendors, hear some of these challenges and work with us on how are we able to find the right solutions and capabilities so that we can evolve and make sure that we are providing the warfighters the best services that we can. So, Dave, over to you.
Thank you. Carolyn, that was wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that your organization is newborn, but yet so mature. I think what I heard in your remarks, I think CDOs from across DoD and intelligence and federal civilian would all agree with you. I think when you got to the very specific use cases, they may have a different use case, but the problems are uniform. And we see those problems at GDIT among our customers. So what I think I'll do is, if I could just shift a little bit, kind of hit some of the themes you did, and see if they resonate with the community here. Thank you. All right, my name is Dave Vandergrund, and I've been at GDIT as the capability lead for AI and data insights for a while. You heard my introduction, but really I'm all about data and analytics and making sure that organizations can get their arms around their data and then leverage it for mission purposes or operations and for the business as well. Let's see if this works. Aiming it. There we go. Good. So the lecture begins, and I'll go very quickly, right? So when we think about the whole expanse of data analytics, we have to acquire the data, store it, we have to transform it, analyze it, and then make it available for consumption. And back in the day, that was a pretty long process. And the tools and stacks and infrastructure for that were expensive and run by very talented and rare individuals. So we're living through an era now where we can get these tools and techniques for those stages in a self-service way. So we can have self-service data preparation, self-service data analytics and visualization, even self-service model building. What does that mean? That means we can have more insight, more diversity of analysis, more people getting access to data more quickly. We don't have to limit it to just those rare data scientists, but rather to data analysts and executives and business analysts, so they can ask and answer questions, presuming they have the data that they need available. So we got to get that data in there and curated and stored. Underneath that little classic top process line, you see I've tried to identify the difference and the similarity between data insights, typical data analytics, and then machine learning. Because I think that is really the core takeaway from my perspective of what data provides you. It provides you information on which to automate, whether it be process automation or data-driven automation, so that you can do things faster, better, innovate, do things standardize, do things you couldn't do before. So if you look at that bottom line, you see there's a divergence. We've been doing classic data analysis for years, creating reports and dashboards, and we call them data insights, and they can be very useful. They can be trend lines, and they can be all that you really need. How many sales did I have last month? That's important. Or how many attacks did I have the last second? Right, very important to know. Yeah. But if we then apply machine learning tools and build models, we can build predictive models or classifiers, put those into that exact same stream and do something. We could classify a stream of data as an attack, or we can say that this is some form of an opportunity to take advantage of, and then further invoke some sort of an automatic response. So these things go hand in hand. A lot of people are afraid of AI. They think it's too complicated and there's too much going on. They're really the same family as data analytics. And the difference is, what do I do with what I've learned? I deploy it into a model to do something. All right, lecture over there. So I just want to talk a little bit, one more second about what AI brings if you have data, right? You can do machine learning. You can understand from vast amounts of previous events, previous attacks, previous exploitations, and you can build models to recognize those and prevent them from happening again. Natural language processing brings us out of the data space into understanding text so that we can do things like speak or write a sentence and query a database. How many attacks did I have last week? I don't have to write a SQL statement. I could actually write a human understandable sentence, right? And then having that ability to process large amounts of information from social media, from news medias, from classified channels, and really be able to ingest, index, and understand that at a semantic level, not just at a keyword level, so you can use that information to inform your analysis and your response. Computer vision is the ability to recognize and tag and index things from full motion video to imagery. And you can imagine how that can help on the perimeter for doing secure operations. Intelligent automation, we kind of blend the ground here. We sort of take RPA, robotic process automation, and sprinkle a little bit of AI fairy dust on it, and we call that intelligent automation, so that you automate a work process, but you might get to a step that used to require a human, a judgment. Well, now we've built a model, an AI model, that can make that judgment or make that assessment. And then finally, if you're in the operations world, you're going to have those trouble tickets, and having cognitive agents who understand spoken or written words and can understand the intent to provide customer care and help desk support is a great application of AI. So these are the 5 pillars we have at GDIT, how we approach AI. That's our strategic approach to the market. But these are the things our customers are using across all of the divisions. And with that, yeah. All right, so this presentation, we're supposed to talk about leveraging data, right? So we've been thinking about this for a long time, and my team and I put together some best practices for making a mission impact on data. I'm going to have a hard time reading the slides. I'm going to do this off the top of my head. But first of all, we really need to take advantage of different frameworks, distributed processing frameworks. We used to, back in the day, buy supercomputers so we can crunch all the data. Well, now, with the 15th year of the Hadoop revolution, we have distributed processing solutions that have far surpassed the original Hadoop into the Spark and in distributed processing in the cloud, so that you can attack very large volumes. We used to be able to not attack large volumes of data. We would sample, or we would spend a lot on infrastructure, right? The Oracle Sun machines were those supercomputers, and operations can't afford that, right? But now you don't have to, right? Distributed processing solves that problem for us. Data lakes solves the problem of having to know beforehand what the data stream has. So we can land our data into lakes without having to model the data before we even get to look at it. So what does that mean? That means we can bring data in and exploit it almost instantly. Back in the day, we had to put a relational database definition files together, and if we had one record fail, we couldn't bring that data into a database, and we couldn't analyze that data, or you could log it off. But the point was, you had to invest before you knew if a data stream had value. Now you can land your data in a lake, exploit it later, and say, oh, that was valuable, or it wasn't valuable at the time, but now it's valuable in the context of more data. I mentioned cloud in passing, but the cloud service providers, AWS, Azure, and Google, all provide an entire stack of service-oriented services for data, for all those processes that I talked about, right? Data access, capture, storage, analysis, modeling, visualization. And you don't have to buy a server. You don't have to buy a piece of hardware. You can rent, right? So we're on the consumption-based model. So if you want to get more out of your data and you don't want to go broke and you want to do an experiment, you can run a $20 experiment overnight on petabyte of data and then say, well, that worked or it didn't work. So cloud economics really helps you be more adventurous and more innovative. We talked about machine learning already, so I'll skip to the next row, self-service. I mentioned that in passing, but again, enabling more people, more voices, more diversity gives us more insights. People look at data differently from a different perspective, so that helps. The last two, I think, go to your main concerns and many of our chief data officers. Like, how do we get our arms around all this data? They're kind of in reverse order. I would talk about curate the data first, right? Create the governance and the catalogs and the structures for the data that you can, and then make the rest of your data discoverable. So even if it's not been tagged and it's not been curated and put into a catalog, people can still find it, discover it, and then maybe put it through a curation process. So those discovery tools are powerful. Some of them are based on NLP. Some of them are based on advanced AI to do schema harmonization and value harmonization. So you might find a table that, or 10 tables that have the same sort of values in a column, and they kind of look like they're 9-digit social security numbers, but in those 10 tables, they might have 10 different names. So schema harmonization says, hey, Mr. Data modeler, you might think those 10 tables are different because they have different names, but they truly are semantically the same. Why don't you put them into one semantic catalog? And then last, open source. Sorry, vendors. The open source community is constantly innovating. Keep an eye on that and try to bring those innovations in, and you'll find they get wrapped by the vendor communities, by the cloud service providers. But if you push them and say, hey, do you have that latest word embedding that is built on Elmo or BERT or GPT-3, they'll say, oh gosh, we don't have that, but we have something similar. So you really keep your eye on what's available in the open source community, because that's who's created the revolution we're living in. Deep learning came from open source. Hadoop came from open source. And that's where the innovation, sorry, again, vendors, but that's where innovation, a big stream of innovation comes from. Not all innovation, but a big stream of it.
No, so I'm really glad that you even bring up the AI in the orchestration piece. That's something that resonates within DISA a lot. We're really pushing so that we can leverage our data in that automated fashion. So start taking the human sensor, start taking the manual data entry out, and allow the products that we either already have or need to bring in to do it for us. That lessens that margin of error of what we have with our data so that we can make actionable decisions with the correct information. I just wanted to throw that in there real quick while I had the thought.
Perfect. No, I think having two voices is certainly better than one. Yeah, so I'm going to bring it home really quickly. This is a reference architecture we use to plug and play all those tools and vendors, but they're the core services that you need to be able to build an analytics platform to get your data together. And I am not going to brief this slide. I just want to let you know this is an architecture, it's a framework, and it really helps anybody who's building an analytics platform or a data management platform. All right, and the last thing that I'll mention is one specific instantiation of this where we've used machine learning to do exactly what you said. We're bringing in multimodal data, and we're meaning text, imagery, video, audio, and we don't have time to tag it all. It's a stream of monstrous amounts of data. So we're running it through machine learning enrichments, and we're tagging images, we're creating auto captions, natural language captions for images. So you could search, let's say 10,000 photos on your iPhone. Can I find a picture of my daughter's 5th birthday, right? And type a natural language query and be able to get imagery back that matches that. So I think that's where the future is going, is this auto tagging in these enrichments coming from machine learning. And I think with that, I'll say thank you. It was great to share some of how I think GDIT and our customers are leveraging data. What are some of the underlying tools and approaches to leverage data?
And I couldn't agree more, especially with the natural language discovery. You know, not everybody can do a SQL query. I mean, I know I could not be able to do that, but what I can do is I can say, find me cute dog pictures in my phone. You know, we need to be able to provide that to not just leadership, but to the workforce for people who don't know how to do a query of, okay, so what I always go back to that, like IIP NetFlow data, because that's a pretty easy one for everybody to kind of gravitate to. So instead of them having to really create this complex query line, they can say, show me the IIP NetFlow data in the last 30 days. That's what people need. We need to have that, how we search on our phone how we search for, clothes on Amazon. We need to be able to do that with our work data as well.
And the good news is we're in the belly of the beast, because you're going to have people coming up to you to show you their natural language solutions.
I'll find the nearest exit. It's okay. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
That is our prepared remarks. I think that we'll do a Q&A session now. Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. It was
No,
fun.
absolutely, Dave. Thank you.
So if you've got your questions, please step up to the mic and let's see if we can't put them on the spot here for those great remarks they made.
So I'll go first. First, I do not envy you, Chief Data Officer. It's a daunting task. So to kind of pull everything together from the weekend, Zero Trust architecture, we can authenticate devices and people and do all these cool things. But if we don't know the data they're trying to, that's really the keystone, the data. So is your office engaging with the Zero Trust folks to try to pull in some of those native cloud tools? Because Google's found a way to do it. Amazon's found a way to do it. You're shopping, you can put a search query in and it comes up. Google, you receive an email and it goes to promotions or social. That's AI. There's no person. That's autonomous. So are you engaged with the Zero Trust group to try to pull that in?
No, great question. Thank you so much. And yeah, CDO, it is kind of a hard gig, but we're going to make it. Yeah. So definitely having conversations with the Zero Trust point of contacts and offices, not just internally to DISA, but also externally, figuring out how they've done it. And then whenever it comes to the data tagging, data classification, really looking for, what were the lessons learned that you had, right? We can have all these ideas of how we think it works, but there's been, as you said, it's been done before. How do we leverage their approach and their lessons learned to make sure we don't make the same mistakes, but that we are being able to trust but verify not only the users, but how they're getting access to the data, what they're doing with the data, and what data sets are they looking at. One of the things that we really want to get to is having that data in a secure fashion. So if you have 6 pieces of data that somebody's accessing, but they really only need to know 2, that we still have all 6 pieces of data there, but they only have the access to the 2. So we don't have to keep having disparate data in disparate, storage locations. We can still keep it together, but they can only access a few. So thank you.
If I could. So Caroline and I were speaking earlier, and we were mentioning that the different approaches available, activity-based access controls, role-based access controls, and kind of that framework that gives us the ability to control access and governance, but also the cost at which it takes to govern that, and looking for accelerators in building out those governance frameworks.
Right. I mean, the resources that you have to put to that is a whole job in itself, only because of how it evolves so quickly with what we're putting in there, with the mission, with what hardware we're putting out, with software. Everything is constantly evolving. So just like you said, the resources to make sure that continues to have a clean hygiene is also what we're looking at.
Hi, my name is Maxim Volodin. I have basically understanding that this has multiple different types of data and different, I call it enclaves. So we're talking about legacy data on the business systems. There's a cyber data. There's a data comes from logistics contracts. Where are you in the process of creating a, basically a data governance approach, including data standardization, where, data cataloging, because it's right, it's just very complex in this environment, and just curious where you are in the process and how you embrace all that different types of data sources.
Yeah, so, me coming into the office, I didn't realize how much we have everywhere, right? Hence the, situation we're in with the data silos and various data ownership. And you may, we've said this before upstairs, you may say boat, I say ship, but really it's a vessel, you know? So we have that data accuracy challenge that I was referring to earlier is rampant, right? So how are we attacking that standardization of legacy data with new data? Where are we at? I'll tell you that we are in the infancy. We're just now figuring out where everything is. And then how do we appropriately bring it into a tool that can then correlate it from cold storage, from active storage, from wherever it may be, and then kind of tag it all together. So long story short, we're still in discovery mode of where everything is.
Thank you.
I'm going to prompt you. So we've seen this problem across other agencies, GSA in particular, and FDIC, NIH, CDC, Defense, Intel. There's certain things that add value when you put them together. There's certain things that you don't need to put together. And so you called them enclaves. I think you had a name for them. You had, when we were speaking earlier, you have a tiered architecture where your data stewards or curators.
Oh yes, yeah.
So that structure is a very common approach.
Oh, thank you. So what we were talking about is basically the DISA community of excellence that we have now. So it's a 3-tiered approach where at the the top tier is our executive steering committee. And those are the SESs, that's senior leadership. That's where we get together and really start looking at that strategic view of what we're doing, with data and the resources that are needed to go there, right? Because we all know who really controls, the money and the resources is at the top. And then that middle layer is that governance panel, just a data governance panel. And those are our tech advisors, our lead engineers, our program managers that they know their program and their infrastructure very, very well. They know where a lot of the data is. They know what resources they have. They know where they should be going. But they also need to know what governance and what the parameters are that they need to be utilizing. And that lower layer, that's that data stewards, data custodians. As I said earlier, we no longer have data owners. We have individuals that can use the data at that level. And they're the ones that are fingers to the keyboard, right? So they're the ones that actually say, hey, I saw a change, and we need to make this work. So, yeah, thank you.
You talked about, Carolyn, you talked about data accuracy and success and leveraging data. What does success look like? What does success look like in managing your data?
Yeah, so I would say, circle back to what I mentioned earlier, the success of leveraging the data as a true asset is where we no longer are emailing 37 spreadsheets to each other. It's where we truly have access as a workforce to not only the business data, but then also the performance data, and we can combine that to ensure the services we're providing to the mission partner are doing what we said that we are going to do. And then how can we evolve it and make it better?
Okay. Good. Over the last 18 months, we've been in a virtual environment for the most part. So, and we're trying to get through this whole data module that we've talked about. We're also talking about some other very hot button items. JADC2 came up. Obviously there's data directly attached to that. Do you see this time frame we've had in the last, I'll say 18 months, it could be plus or minus a month or two, has that helped your business, helped us to get smarter, or has it created a greater backlog?
Oh my gosh, I really think it's propelled us as globally, not just DoD, but industry-wide on how we can leverage our data and do cross communication and collaborative efforts with storing data together, and then also knowing what the other person knows. You can make a real informed decision and not just shoot off the hip. Ones and zeros don't lie, right? I mean, it's just not happening. Right. So I think that with us being virtual and having to really lean on some of these tools that we've begun integrating within that allows us to put data together, and it allows us to have easy, authoritative data sources and true knowledge management, because we can't just go to the office and ask somebody a question. We have to rely on these tools. So yeah, I definitely think it's propelled us, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, no, I love that word, propel. I'm going to quote our president, Amy Gilliland. She had a keynote speech a couple days ago at a Women in Tech conference, and she said the effects from COVID, virtualization or remote work, have put us into 2025, and we were looking at 2021. Yeah. So, and she meant that in a lot of ways. And in the people side of the business, we now lean on each other 24/7, right? But we're not always having to be available, right? So we have this ability to work when it makes sense and to take your kids to soccer when it makes sense. But the data in the tasking has really kind of been honed down to what's essential and what was a waste of time, and how can I do this better, and what can I automate? Now, we haven't gotten to 2025 perfectly, but we see what it's going to look like.
It was really just having the strategy laid out, and as a workforce, it goes back to that data-centric mindset workforce of embracing that strategy. That change is okay in a certain way. We don't need filing cabinets, guys. We really don't. It's okay.
Okay, great discussion. I've got another question coming from the audience.
Hey, Caroline, Dave, Jeremy Corey here from August Shell. I have a two-part question. First, Caroline, you talked a little bit about governance, parameters, structure, silos of data. Then Dave, you talked a little bit about self-service analytics and then applying AI models to large volumes of data.
Yeah.
The first part of the question is to you, Caroline, and that is really around how much influence or authority will the Office of the CDO have in meeting operational requirements around data at the agency? And after that, Dave, thinking in that context, what is your perspective on the operational requirement for needing all of the unfiltered raw data, and how realistic is that based on your experience in applying many of those AI models that you went through?
Thank you so much for your question, Jeremy. So I'm very excited about where DISA currently is whenever it comes to the CDO office. Not only because this is a new office that we're building from the ground up, who wouldn't want to do that, but also the enthusiasm and the backing that we have from our leadership. General Skinner, in his his strategy, has leveraging data at the center of gravity as his third main strategic goal for the agency. He continues to talk about data. He continues to talk about how we need to leverage it as an asset, how we need to put this in the forefront of our mind. That right there tells me they're pretty invested. If he's talking about it all the time, I think it's kind of a big deal. And then also with Mr. Barnhurst and then Mr. Greenwell and everybody continuously saying, where are you going? Just keep running. What you're doing with data and what your strategy is exactly where we need to go. So not only are they enthusiastic about it, but they also are giving the CDO the authority to really put forth these policies and instructions across the agency, saying, hey, I know that you guys did this before, but now we're going a different way with it, and it's signed, at that level. Their backing, their push for change as well is what's really going to ensure that the CDO office has that authority, but also has the authority behind it from leadership that we will not fail. We will definitely succeed with that. And then second part.
All right, I'm going to try to remember the second part, but how realistic is it that operations maintain or exploit or store all of their data? Is that roughly where we're going?
Sure. Yeah. Just to recap, so it's really focused around your perspective on that operational requirement that we have historically heard around operations needing all unfiltered raw data versus any type of summarization of it. And what is your perspective on that?
Well, we're going to continue, but my perspective is that we're going to continue to see that amount of data production exponentially increase. So that's the tension on one side of the story. The other side of the story is the cost of collecting and storing that is continuously dropping. Do we need to store it all? If there's a regulatory requirement, you need to store it all. Do you need to store it all to do your operation? When there's not a regulatory requirement, there's a lot of strategies that we're seeing people execute. One of them is, as you said, aggregation or summarization, but deploying to the point of collection models to actually exploit that data and make a decision. So some people call it AI at the edge or inference at the edge, right? So actually, as that information is flowing through, you make a decision, and what you pass back might be the decision, the action, and maybe the context, the data that was needed there. But that full stream has just gone by. Where's it gone? Depends. It could be spilling on the floor if that's allowed. It could be spilling into, some very cold storage, right? Perhaps, maybe even specific storage. Maybe even a device makes sense. Maybe you could get below the price point of a bulk store, a cold store, or a tape store in the cloud. But I would look there first. Now, one thing, I'll just to give you an example of where this is really important. The FAA runs a backbone network, and the system's called SWIM. Don't ask me what it stands for because I forgot, SWIM. But it has all the information from all the planes and flights, every single piece of information in real time. And that is consumed by a variety of people who pay for it to commercial entities who ingest it and then monetize and then create a value-added analytic like delays, like flight delays, sell services like a weather forecast. It's a flight forecast. And yet, FAA couldn't store that data itself. It just went onto the network and just disappeared into space. So they said, we need to capture that for two reasons. One, we can monetize it or make it valuable. And two, we might need it for analytics, for safety, for improving operations. So they finally connected that endless stream into an AWS data lake. Right, and they're able to do that for future value. So it's kind of the idea is we're not quite sure if it's valuable now, but we think it might be.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have one more question? Okay, we'll take one more, and then we got to take a break.
Hi, Carol and Dave. Mark Hinson from Oracle. You mentioned a couple things as with the services that you're providing, for instance, a Center of Excellence. So can you talk a little bit about where you would see DISA working with those data stewards to provide centers of excellence for things like model training or data enrichment, some of the things you talked about? Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you. That's a great question. When it comes to our data stewards, our data custodians, the CDO office, I can't tell them to do something if I don't give them the resources, the training, the SOPs to do something, right? That's like, hey, go drive a forklift, but you don't know how to drive a forklift. You're just asking for trouble at that point, right? So if what the CDO office is, and it's on our strategic map, and a priority for us as well, is to ensure that we are giving these data stewards and data custodians not just training, oh, here's a piece of paper, figure it out. But we want to do schooling. We want to make sure that they have the resources at their fingertips, that if they don't know something, that they can get that accurate data then. We're doing, we have some data analytic training right now within our DISA Skillsoft training environment. But to me, it's not enough. A 6-minute video is not going to tell somebody how to really utilize a data catalog, right? So we've already started looking at training elsewhere, bringing in, not in person, but I guess virtual classrooms, and we keep them on the book so that anybody in the workforce can use it. It's not just for the data stewards and the data custodians. It's for anybody. If somebody in I'm going to use an acronym, I'm sorry. If somebody in HR wants to just know what data analytics is, they should be able to take the training, because it's really going to end up helping them just by getting that mindset change of that more data-centric or centricity. So, yeah, we're looking at making sure that they have what they need at their fingertips for sure.
Okay, great. How about a big hand for our team today? For Dave and Carolyn, first of all, thank you for your session today. You opened up the aperture to data or data analytics, really. And what I really like about this and many other of our sessions today is a government and industry discussion. I know for a fact that that's how we're going to get to the finish line, and it's going to take a lot of work, no matter what we talk about. In lieu of a speaker gift, you may have heard this before, we're going to make a donation to the Fisher House on your behalf. Fisher House takes care of wounded warriors and wounded warrior families. And we do that for most of our events, and that's for this session and all sessions that we have here this week. We have one more session this afternoon in this space. It'll go at 3 o'clock or 1500. It's going to be a military and civilian discussion that will focus on optimizing the workforce in a post-pandemic environment. And it'll be presented by Jennifer Augustine, Director of DISA's Office for Strategic Outreach and Acquisition. The final session in the keynote area this afternoon will be entitled Driving Velocity in Industry, and it will start at 3 o'clock. And thereafter, there'll be a somewhat of a reception. And then tomorrow, for those that are signed up for tomorrow, which is everybody who's registered for TechNet Augusta, DISA has their outreach session that'll go on Friday. So you won't want to miss that. You'll probably get more insight than you received the last 2 days. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.